crazy mother.
What it do, what it do, what it do, soul visionaries and potential soul visionaries out there. I am your grateful soul brother, Sherrod Corner, and you are now rocking with the SoulVizion Powercast. You know, that place where we keep it unfiltered and raw. We talk about anything from porn to politics. We'll even talk about the things you might have heard or even saw. Now, today we're talking about blame. Blame. Not shame, but blame. We're talking about that today. More specifically, we're talking about what happens when dealing with somebody who always seems to have a complaint about you. You're always doing something wrong. You always have some kind of bad intention. You always say something wrong. You always look at them wrong. Your tone is wrong. Your timing is wrong. Your response is wrong. Hell, even when you ain't doing shit or saying nothing, it's wrong. You feel me? Everything you do is wrong. And after dealing with all of that long enough, something starts to happen to you. You start constantly explaining yourself. You start defending things that don't even need defending. You start questioning your own intentions. You start replaying conversations in your head. Did I say something wrong? Did I do something wrong? Maybe I should have explained it differently. Maybe I should have said it another way. And before you know it, you're spending more time defending your character than actually living according to your character. That shit can be hella exhausting, player. So today, we're going to help you get beyond the blame. We're going to talk to you. We're going to talk about why some people constantly accuse, criticize, and complain. We're going to talk about projection. We're going to talk about deflection. We're going to talk about accountability. We're going to talk about why constantly defending yourself can actually make the situation worse. And most importantly, we're going to talk about how to protect your peace without becoming someone who refuses to listen to legitimate criticism. Because there's a difference between refusing false responsibility and refusing accountability. And we're going to make that distinction crystal clear today. Let's kick it. Have you ever dealt with somebody where damn near every conversation somehow ends up becoming about what you've done? You can bring up something they did, and 5 minutes later, you're defending yourself. You can say, hey, you know, yesterday, what you did, that really fucked with me yesterday. But instead of them saying, okay, tell me what bothered you, you know, how did I do that? They'll say something like, well, what about what you did last week? Or said last week. You're like, wait a minute, how the hell did we get here? Or maybe you should say, or I didn't appreciate the way you talked to me, right? Now all of a sudden, that turns into, well, maybe if you didn't make me angry, I wouldn't have talked to you like that. Now you're responsible for their behavior. You know what I'm saying? Their words, their reactions, their emotions, and somehow they're responsible for none of it. That's deflection. Instead of dealing with what's directly in front of them, they redirect the conversation somewhere else. And sometimes that redirection becomes an accusation. Because if I can get you busy defending yourself, you don't have time to hold me accountable. Let me say that shit again. If they can keep you busy defending yourself, you don't have time to hold them accountable. That's how the conversation gets flipped. Here's how I look at it. Some people treat accountability like a hot potato. You know that game, hot potato? You know, we used to throw that joint around. The second that it gets too hot in their hands, they throw it in yours. They don't want to sit with it. They don't want to examine it. They don't want to ask, did I contribute to this? Was I wrong? Could I have handled this differently? Did my insecurity influence how I interpreted that situation? Because those questions require something. They require self-awareness. And self-awareness isn't always comfortable. Sometimes looking in the mirror means seeing some shit about yourself that you don't particularly care for. So instead of saying, maybe I'm jealous, it's easier to say, you're trying to make me jealous. Instead of saying, I'm insecure about this relationship. It's easier to say, you must be doing something behind my back. Instead of saying, damn, I overreacted. It's easier to say, you made me react that way. And instead of saying, I handled that badly, it's easier to say, well, if you hadn't done what you did, I wouldn't have done what I did. That's the hot potato. Accountability lands in their hands, and immediately it becomes too hot to handle. So they get that shit right back to you. Quick, fast, in a hurry. Booyah. Let's talk about another piece of this. It's called projection. Projection is when somebody takes something inside of them and starts assigning it to you. Their insecurity becomes your intention. Their fears become your behavior. Their suspicion becomes your guilt. Their unresolved experiences become evidence against you. And this is where relationships can become extremely unhealthy. Because now you're not just dealing with the person standing in front of you, you're dealing with everybody who hurt them before you. Their ex, their parents, their childhood, their abandonment, their betrayal, their disappointments, their unresolved bullshit, and somehow you got handed the whole bill to pay. And that's why somebody can sometimes respond to something small like it's something huge. Just take it all, just make a mountain out of a molehill. You can come home 30 minutes late, and suddenly, where were you? Who are you with? Why didn't you answer immediately? Who are you talking to? I know something ain't right. And you're standing there thinking like, damn, I just stopped at the doggone grocery store. But here's something important. We have to be careful, because not every accusation is projection. Let me say that again. Not every accusation is projection. Not every complaint is manipulation. Sometimes, flat out, you did that shit. Trust me. Hey, man, I had to come to grips with some of this stuff, man. When you just being honest with yourself, when somebody throws something at you and you actually did it, just own your bullshit. That's all. Let's keep that shit real. Sometimes somebody is calling you out because you actually need to be called out. That's where emotional maturity comes in. One of the biggest mistakes people make when learning about boundaries is using boundaries to avoid accountability. They learn a couple psychological terms like projection, gaslighting, narcissism, manipulation, toxicity, or being toxic, and suddenly everyone who disagrees with them is toxic. Nah, player. Sometimes they're not gaslighting you. Sometimes they're telling you something you just don't want to hear. So before you reach an accusation, check yourself and ask yourself, is there any truth to what they're saying? Did my actions actually contribute to this? Could I have handled this differently? Am I getting defensive because they're wrong or because they hit something I don't want to acknowledge? You know, they say them hit dogs holler. You know, they holler loud. See, that's maturity, when you can ask yourself those questions and you can answer them honestly. Because the goal is to never accept blame. You know, my fault. Because the goal isn't to never accept blame. The goal is to only accept what actually belongs to you. Remember, the goal isn't to never accept blame. The goal is only to accept what actually belongs to you. That's a major difference. I can say, yeah, I shouldn't have raised my voice, right? Without accepting you don't care about me. I can say I should have communicated that better without accepting you intentionally tried to hurt me. I can say I forgot to call without accepting you forgot because I'm not important to you. See the difference? Behavior can be accountable, but someone else's interpretation of your motives doesn't automatically become your responsibility. You don't get to tell me what my intentions were. I always tell people, your perception, my intentions. Now, if we never communicate, then there's going to be a misunderstanding. So we need to be able to talk to one another. You can tell me how my actions affected you, and I should listen to that. I should be empathetic to your feelings. But you don't get to write what's inside my head and then determine or demand that I defend your version of me that you created. Here's where a lot of us get caught. Over explaining. Somebody falsely accuses you of something and you immediately react. Your immediate reaction is, wait a minute, hold up. Then you start presenting evidence. That's not what happened. Here's what I actually said. Remember Tuesday? Look at this text. Ask so-and-so. Here's where I was. And 20 minutes later, you done turned your damn living room into a Law and Order. You got exhibits, witnesses, screenshot, text messages, phone records, receipts. Shit, you close as hell to just calling a forensic specialist over there to try to prove your point. Why? Because you believe if I can explain this clearly enough, they'll understand. But here's the problem with that way of thinking. You can't use logic for somebody, or you can't logic someone out of something they didn't logic themselves into. You feel me? You can't use logic that way for somebody that didn't use logic to get where they got to. You know what I'm saying? And if the accusations is coming from insecurity, fear, jealousy, or anger, or a need to avoid or responsibility, your 10-minute explanation might not change a thing. It might actually create 10 more things for them to argue with you about. Now they're dissecting your explanation. Why do you say it like that? Why did it take 3 seconds to answer? Why are you getting so defensive? Why are you talking so much if you didn't do anything? Now your defense becomes evidence against you. That's the trap. At some point, you have to stop trying to win the case, because healthy relationships aren't supposed to operate like courtrooms. You shouldn't constantly have to prove that you're a good person. So instead of automatically going into like a defense mode, start using boundaries. Here are 3 boundaries you can use. We're gonna use 3 boundaries that you can actually use. Not textbook shit. We're not that shit out the book. Just some real life boundaries that you can use. Something you can remember when the conversation gets too heated. If you've already explained yourself, this is one of my issues. If you've already explained yourself and the conversation keeps going around in circles, like what my man named Billy Preston, here we go round in circles. If it keeps going around in circles, just say, I know my truth, and I'm not going to argue about this anymore. Notice what you're not saying. You're not saying you're crazy. You're not saying you're stupid. You're not saying fuck you. You're not saying I've communicated, I've communicated with your ass. Shut up. You're not going there. You're just basically saying I've communicated my position. I've answered your question. I've explained what happened. And I'm not going to spend the next 3 hours proving it all over again. Sometimes peace requires ending a conversation that has stopped being productive. You're discussing one issue, and suddenly they bring up 5 other issues. Stop that right there. Stop it. Stop it right there. Boom. You got to stop it. Look, say some shit like, we're talking about this issue right now. Let's finish this issue that we're on right now before we bring up anything else. See, that's a powerful statement. That's just keeping it right here. That's keeping us focused, because now we're refocusing we're refusing to chase a moving target. We're focused on that one target right here. This is what we're talking about. If we're talking about what happened Tuesday, we're talking about what happened Tuesday. We're not talking about what happened Christmas 2019. We're not talking about something about your ex. We're not talking about what my mama said, your mama said. We're not talking about the time I forgot your birthday 7 years ago. We're not talking about none of that. We're talking about Tuesday. What happened Tuesday? And after we finish talking about Tuesday, then we can talk about all the other things that you want to. We're going to finish one conversation before we start another one. That's how you communicate. sometimes the conversation is just not going nowhere. Voices keep getting louder. Emotions, just everything's getting heated. Disrespect is entering the room. Accusations flying. Ain't nobody listening. We just talking. We trying to talk over each other. That's when you have to just pull back, and you got to say some shit like, "I'm happy to talk to you when we both can be calm, but I'm stepping away from this conversation for now." And then step the hell away. And then step the hell away. That's what you got to do, man. Sometimes you got to step away. Don't say you're done and then stand there arguing for another 45 minutes, though. A boundary you refuse to enforce is just a suggestion. Sometimes walking away isn't avoidance. Sometimes walking away is just self-control. It's stopping you from saying something you might regret or doing something you might regret. There's a difference between running away from difficult conversations and refusing to participate in destructive ones. Let's put this into a real situation. Your partner says, "You don't care about me, you never make time for me." The old response might be, "What the fuck you talking about? I took your ass out Saturday, I called you yesterday, I brought dinner, I came over Tuesday, I canceled plans just for your ass." Now you're defending yourself. So instead, slow it down, brother. Slow it down. There might be a legitimate feeling underneath that accusation. It's time to show some empathy. So try saying some shit like, "I hear that you're feeling neglected. Let's talk about what you're needing from me. But you accusing me of not caring is not an accurate statement. And I'm not going to accept that characterization of me. I'm not going to accept it." You see what I'm saying? It's a difference, man. It's levels to this. Acknowledge their feeling. Acknowledge it. Hey, I understand it. I hear it. Boom, we're going to communicate about it. But you don't automatically have to accept the accusation. That's emotional intelligence. Family can be one of the hardest places to establish boundaries because your family know your bullshit. Your family knows your history. Your family know who you are. They know your mistakes. They know your weaknesses. And sometimes they'll pull out a 20-year-old version of who you used to be whenever the current version of you becomes inconvenient. The new person you've become. So you say, "I'm not comfortable with that anymore." And they say, "Oh, now you think you're better than everybody?" Nah. Growth doesn't mean you think you're better than anybody. Growth just means you're no longer willing to keep being the version of yourself that made everybody else feel comfortable. You don't have to defend your evolution, ever. Protecting your peace doesn't mean building a wall around yourself where nobody can tell you anything. That's not strength. That's insecurity wearing an armor. You're just trying to protect your insecurities. That's not what we want. Real strength can listen. Real strength can reflect. Real strength can apologize. Real strength can say, "You know what? I was wrong." But real strength can also say, "No, that's not mine to carry. That's not mine at all. I'm not taking that one." You need both. You need to be able to do both. See, accountability without boundaries will have you carrying everybody else's shit. And boundaries without accountability will turn you into the person who never thinks they're wrong. We don't need the extreme sides of either one. You got to be down the middle. You got to be flexible or whatnot. We want emotional maturity. You got to own your actions. You got to own your words. You got to own your decisions. Own your mistakes. Own your healing. Own your bullshit. Remember, I say OYBS. Own your bullshit. But I don't have to own your assumptions. I don't have to own your insecurities. I don't have to own your projections. I don't have to own the story you created about me without asking me. And I'm damn sure not going to spend my entire life standing in somebody else's imaginary courtroom defending myself. Nah. My soul visionaries. I know some of y'all are exhausted. Not because you're doing too much, but because you're explaining too much. You're trying to convince somebody of something that you've already explained 10 different ways. You're trying to prove your heart, prove your intentions, prove your loyalty, your character. At some point, you've got to understand something. The people who genuinely want to understand you will ask questions. The people who only want to accuse you will keep moving the goalposts. They're going to keep moving the goalposts. You got to know the difference. Take accountability, right? When accountability belongs to you. Apologize when you're wrong. Make corrections when corrections need to be made. Listen when somebody tells you that your actions hurt them. But don't confuse accountability with becoming somebody else's emotional punching bag. You could take accountability for what you did without accepting responsibility for what somebody else made up. And sometimes the healthiest sentence you can say, that ain't mine to carry. Their insecurity, that ain't mine to carry. Their assumptions, that ain't mine to carry. Their refusal to communicate, that ain't mine to carry. Their unwillingness to take accountability, that shit ain't mine to carry. I will carry my mistakes. I will carry my responsibilities. I will carry the consequences of my decisions, because that's what grown motherfuckers do. Grown people, they gonna own their bullshit all day long. They gonna stand 10 toes in it. But I refuse to carry somebody else's bullshit just because they don't want to carry it themselves. That's where the blame stops. And that's where your peace begins. Before you leave this conversation, ask yourself one question. Am I taking responsibility for something I actually did, or am I carrying responsibility someone else handed to me? This has been another episode of the SoulVizion Powercast. I am your grateful soul brother, Sherrod Corn. Remember, you don't have to defend yourself against every accusation. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. And you don't have to sacrifice your peace trying to convince somebody determined to misunderstand you. Stay accountable, stay self-aware, protect your peace, keep growing, keep learning yourself, and keep elevating. Until next time, Soul Visionaries, it's 2026, and we are still in the mix. Peace.